Привет, товарищи, меня зовут Paul. And for those of you who don't understand Russian, I've basically said, hi comrades, I'm Paul. And over the next sort of 10 weeks or so, I'm going to be visiting a multitude of different sites here in Russia, in Moscow specifically, including hotels, famous landmarks, Stalin's Seven Sisters. So just stay tuned over the next 10 weeks or so, and we're going to have an absolute blast. One thing just to add here as well, it's such a great place, such an iconic place, but I'm also going to tell you at the end of this video the one thing that you do not want to do here on Red Square, so stay tuned. So there's really, I would say, four main parts of Red Square that we'll see here. So basically, as you see here, this is probably the most iconic part here. We have St. Basil's Cathedral, and this was built 3 or 4 centuries ago, and this is probably the real focal point, I would say, of Red Square. So it's very iconic, and for those of us who've never actually been to Russia before, it's that one place, maybe that one monument, that one landmark that everybody really knows and recognises. Interestingly, this place was a church, and this church was obviously used to have services and people used to visit here. Now not so much, and actually over the most recent times it's more been just a museum. Now sadly you can't actually film inside, but at the same time they do still have services here from time to time. And I'll just sort of pan across now to the right hand side here, because these are the Kremlin gates. This is the famous, is it Spasskaya Tower, I think it's called. And yeah, so you might see on the TV where the president sometimes comes through and he drives into the Kremlin, and this is generally the gate where he drives into. Obviously it's closed now. I don't actually know if it's possible to go inside the Kremlin walls anymore. Certainly when I was here for the first time about 8 years ago, then yes you could, but I'm not sure if you can now anymore. Now this place here is where the queue would be normally for Lenin's mausoleum, but actually it's the weekend now, so what that means is Lenin's mausoleum is actually closed for the weekend, but usually the queue would be right down to the very bottom there of the street. So yeah, usually the waiting time, it moves pretty quick because everybody is generally moving in turn. There's not like long periods, but even so, it could be about an hour's wait just to get into Lenin itself. But you can see here there's security scanners which you walk into first, and then you've obviously got to go through the mausoleum itself. And right here we have Lenin's mausoleum. This in itself is actually worth another video probably in the next sort of few weeks or so. I do actually want to come here because there's so much here to actually see. Now you can't actually film inside the mausoleum itself, but in short this was built in, I would say, originally there was a new structure that was built in 1924 after Lenin actually died. But then after that there was this new monument here that was built, and if you watch a lot of old films on the internet video, there's been a lot of speeches that were conducted on the roof of this mausoleum as well. So it's very much, it was a focal point of the USSR as well. But it's not actually just about the body inside of Lenin himself, who's been embalmed for over 100 years or so now. There's still debates which exist which talk about whether actually he should be buried more formally as the other general secretaries of the Soviet Union. Now Stalin was actually buried alongside Lenin as well, up to the year I think 1953, but there was a process called de-Stalinization, and after some of the atrocities were more apparent, shall we say, then Stalin was buried in the walls behind the Kremlin, or sorry, behind the mausoleum itself. So if you can sort of see just behind the mausoleum, I'm just going to try and show you here if we can. You can see here there's actually some of the graves of the leaders just here as well, so just look closely there. I think that white one there is Stalin. So and just behind, just to the right of this here as well, you'll see that there are the other people, which again, when I do another video, I will show you the whole thing. And then just behind the graves as well, actually in the Kremlin walls, there is actually a load of graves and a load of people interred with ashes inside the Kremlin walls. So examples would be Yuri Gagarin is there as well. And yeah, maybe in the future I will show you that also. Now, what I find really interesting about this place is that Lenin himself, when he was alive, he didn't actually want his body to be used for any kind of cult of personality, any kind of publicity in the way that it actually was used. But I guess people thought after he died that they needed some kind of focal point just to really bring everyone's attention together. So I guess that's maybe what they did. Now this here is the Resurrection Gate, built in 1680, And this was a very symbolic entrance gate to Moscow during the imperial times, so think about the times of the Tsar as well. Now, often when I came to Moscow and I saw videos, especially the war parades and the military parades here in the city, I often thought, how do they actually shut off the Red Square to the locals, which they obviously have to do for, you know, logistical reasons. And these gates actually close, so you can see here, if you look very, very closely in the corner here, you can see that actually there are full gates which shut properly. And here we have the Государственный исторический музей, which in English means the State History Museum. And this is actually the oldest history museum in Russia and the largest history museum here in Russia. Now, another interesting fact is that actually before this building was built, there used to be the very first pharmacy in Moscow on this very site. And again, you can see all these buildings here have these terracotta and red sort of features as well. It's very iconic and very much part of what they call Red Square. Now, another interesting fact about this place is that Red Square, the name for it in Russian is actually Krasnaya Ploshchad. And Krasnaya Ploshchad, of course, means Red Square, but many years ago, the language obviously has evolved. What that means is Krasnaya Ploshchad used to mean beautiful square, so beautiful has now become red. And the word for beautiful in Russian now is krasivaya. And right, what we see here is GUM. Now, what is GUM? Well, GUM is a shopping centre, maybe the oldest shopping centre, most famous shopping centre here in Moscow. So this was built, I think, a couple of hundred years or so ago. And inside, again, this is where the video in its own right. So I'm going to do a real in-depth exploration here. But in short, it's somewhere where, you know, you've got all kinds of stuff. It reminds me a little bit, for those of you who are English or know England very well, it reminds me a little bit of Harrods inside. You'll kind of get what I'm saying about this. But yeah, so this is a very iconic place and you can buy anything and everything in here. There's brands in here, famous Western brands, the likes of the Hugo Bosses of the world, many of whom have actually left Russia due to the recent sanctions, but nevertheless, there's all kinds of stuff here. Окей, здравствуйте, как вас зовут?
Екатерина.
Екатерина, привет, я Пол. И как вас зовут?
Юлия.
Юлия, хорошо. А вы живете тут в Москве?
Я живу, да.
Это ваш родной город также?
Нет.
А где вы живете? Какой у вас родной город?
Нижний Новгород.
Нижний Новгород, я знаю Нижний Новгород. Говорите мне, как вы думаете, когда вы видите Красную площадь, как ваши ощущения, так скажем?
Первый раз, когда приехала в Москву, было очень все масштабно, невероятно красиво, но я живу здесь почти 10 лет, и для меня это уже как обыденность, то есть как дома я себя здесь чувствую, как родной город, да, поэтому нету какого-то уже вау-эффекта, просто мне приятно, что я живу в центре России, в самом красивом городе.
Все услуги и так далее,
да,
и
да,
отлично.
Поэтому, да, я обожаю Москву, и здесь круто.
Прекрасно, хорошего дня там.
Спасибо.
Here we are right at the bottom of where the start of Lenin's mausoleum queue starts, and behind me I've got this kind of Arabic or kind of Middle Eastern themed concert thing going on here. Now, I wasn't planning on actually filming this, but it sounds quite interesting. I think we've got an Iranian flag, some Russian flags, and some other Middle Eastern flags here. Not quite sure exactly what it is, but anyway, it seems interesting. And something else I've just known here as well, this road actually is called Kremlovsky Проезд.
Дамы и господа, давайте поаплодируем Аль-Масджуд. Специально для вас выступает.
So as best as I can tell, this is some kind of cultural event here, which is celebrating the United Arab Emirates, and it says here Dni Kultury, which I guess means Day of Culture, something like this, or Days of Culture. So hey, who'd have thought on a day like this, on a Saturday in sunny Moscow, hey, what a connected world we live in. Now, what I did say to you guys earlier in the video is the one thing you do not want to do here in Moscow, in Krasnaya Ploshchad, in Red Square. And that is, if you look at where we are now, we are just at the top of Krasnaya Ploshchad, the top of Red Square, just by St. Basil's Cathedral, just behind me here, and just opposite the Spasskaya Tower, just over here as well. Now, what you do not want to do is take a taxi just randomly from the taxi rank pickup point. I'll just show you where that is. This is the taxi rank here. Now, if you ever visit Moscow, if you ever visit Red Square, what I highly recommend you do is you download the Yandex app, which is just like Uber that you have in the UK or in America or anywhere in collective West, we'll call it, and always use an Yandex taxi. I made the mistake when I first came here about 8 years ago. I jumped in a taxi and the taxi driver tried to scam me. So please do not make the same mistake as me. Otherwise, you're going to have a cracking time here in Red Square. Hey everyone, really hope you enjoyed that video this week. It's my first Rolex, my first video. Stay tuned next week because we're going to end up in somewhere, even I don't know where yet. Take care, just leave it.